Good afternoon, everyone. This is Anthony Guerrero here, broadcasting out of Oak Brook Terrace. I just want to thank everyone for joining us, specifically our two guests that we have here with us this afternoon. We have Bud Keebler, who is actually a senior marketing director from Chris Felton's organization. And we have recently started working together, and he brought this College Freedom program to me. And actually reminded me about this program that I had actually been exposed to a little while back when I was invited by Chris Felton to attend Larry Morrison's seminar, essentially webinar that he put on. So I want to thank Larry and Bud for joining us. And Larry, I know, has many years of experience here. He's going to give you a really thorough education on how the whole college loan forgiveness program works. Okay. I've been in this industry 22 plus years, and I just want to share it real quick, and I'm going to turn it over to Bud here in a minute so he can share his experience, and then we'll pass it off to Larry. But anyway, let me just share real quick. And, 22 years that I've been practicing, our platform has grown tremendously, from starting out really protecting families and focusing on retirement to now we have our 7 money milestones. And, about 8 years ago, roughly, we partnered with the Heartland Institute of Financial Education, which is a national nonprofit that actually endorses the How Money Works book. And I know we were one of the first groups here in our entire company to become part of it. And one of the things that we really were attracted to was the college planning process, helping kids, right, who have not gone to full university yet, navigate through the process of selecting the right college for the right reason, for the right price. And really that program is about preventing college debt and making sure people can get as much money as possible. But we never had a solution for the 1.6 trillion or whatever the new numbers are of the growing college debt that is just crippling so many people in this country are crippled by college debt. And right now we've got COVID, so we've got the zero interest, but that we all know that's a temporary thing. And there's been talk about forgiving that. I'm sure Larry can speak to that. I don't think that's going to happen. But, bottom line is it's a real problem. And I find the biggest amount of debt exists with professionals because they go on and do more school. And, people are waiting to have families, buy homes, et cetera. So it's really, really hurting a lot of people out there. And when you look at it, I read a statistic, which I thought was just terrifying, that 40,000 people, I don't know if this is a couple of years back, I don't know what the new number is, are currently getting their social security checks garnished to pay for their student loan debt. I mean, so there's really almost no way to get out of it except what Larry's going to talk about. And it's just great to have this resource. I'm really excited about just being able to help those people and guide them and do that planning for them. Because at the end of the day, we are financial educators, and we're here to be a resource for our clients and potential people out there, so we can guide them on becoming financially literate. And this is a big part of becoming financially literate. So, Bud, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can introduce Larry.
Cool. Great. I appreciate you having us over, and you guys are going to really learn a lot today. This has been one of the best tools I have had with me and my base and team, being able to help them get successful, and most importantly, making a difference in people's lives. There's an awful lot of folks that are getting talked into getting degrees that are not going to change their paycheck when they get out of college. And then they come out of college, make the same money, and on top of that, they've got to pay $500, $600, $700, $800 a month. And so it really discourages people. They just think they can't have a house or anything. Fast story. I have a newlywed couple of friends of ours. The husband is a pharmacist, finished school, owes $120,000 for his education. The wife is working nursing school, and she thinks she'll owe about 30 when she's done, and her parents have helped her and her other kids, and she thought they might owe 30 grand. She got to talking to them. They owe $220,000, and they're in their mid-50s. That is a retirement killer. And so we got on with College Loan Freedom and talked to really neat lady that I work with a lot over there named Brenda. And by the time we were 10 to 15 minutes into the conversation, she gave them a real good idea of how much they could lower their payments. And we're going to be able to pull $2,000 out of there between the parent and the son. And it gives them hope. And that's the thing, that college loans are hope crushers. And so I'm really fortunate that I had a chance to meet Larry and Larry Morrison. And Larry is president of College Loan Freedom. And I kind of stuck my toe in the water a little cautiously here because I wanted to make sure I wasn't advocating something that was going to end up being an issue. And Larry and I spent some time, really good time, talking about how we can really protect the clients and make a massive difference to them. He explained all the laws and those things to me. And really good guy, has written a book on this subject. He is president of the oldest company in this industry. It's a real passion of his, and it's becoming a serious passion of mine too. So Larry, make us smarter, okay? Thank you.
Wow. Thank you guys, Bud and Anthony. I feel like rolling out the red carpet for me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think you guys took 2 of my slides away. I could skip those now. I don't need to do any of that. But no, thank you again, everybody. I'm super excited to be partnered with you and bring this information to you guys so that you have it when you're out there talking to families. And I really, really, really resonate with financial education. You know, Bud and Anthony and I know how powerful it really is and how much it would change the landscape of our nation, our world, if we actually taught money in school. How crazy would that be, right? But until that day comes, we get the honor and pleasure of doing that for the people that come to us for that. So let's dive right in. I'm going to share my screen here. My presentation is only about 30 minutes unless I get long-winded, and we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A. That's the goal here, okay? So I want you to understand that the goal overall is for not only for you to leave with this training with you know, better understanding the student loan situation and solutions that we're going to use and talk about, but more information about how to go get more clients, how to talk to more people, how to start, you know, financial conversations, how to get your foot in the door with professionals like Anthony said, and then of course be dangerous when it comes to just, you know, packed full of value and knowledge when people ask you questions about student loans. So let's dive right in here. I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. I am the president of College Loan Freedom, as Bud said, and I think I skipped my, I'm sure I'll show it again. That's my book there, best-selling author of Student Loan Debt Secrets, available on Amazon. Almost on Audible. We're still waiting for, I guess Audible's kind of clogged up for COVID. But anyway, so what our company does is very simple. It's just like going to a tax professional, except for student loans. So we go through all the government programs. We talk to the clients. We do all the paperwork, cross every T, dot every I, and speak to the Department of Education and the servicers on the behalf of our clients. And our overall goal is always the same. How do we save as much money as humanly possible on student debt? That's the lens through which we look through the issue with, okay? So that's kind of what we do. So if you ever have like, hey, why do you want to talk to this company? Because it's like going to, you could do your taxes on your own, but it's like sitting down with an expert, right? Same thing. Okay, so let's dive into a little bit of the problem. I'm not going to spend too much time on the problem. As we all know, it is a giant issue. Spend most of the time on solutions, but let's just get a little backstory. As of today, if you didn't know, and Anthony briefly touched on this, it actually crossed the $1.7 trillion mark earlier this year in May, owed by 45 million Americans. So second only to mortgage debt now. Which is a fancy way of saying that next to a mortgage or rent, if you have a student loan, the second biggest expense in the budget is going to be that student loan. And then owed by 45 million Americans is basically saying 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 working adults between the ages of 25 and 65. And of course, if you get into certain professions, certain groups of people, you know, like frontline workers and things like that, it's going to be a lot more than just 1 in 3 people. So this is I'm not going to spend too much time on the history of how we got here, just enough to understand the CARES Act. So in 2007, student loan debt was only $300 billion. I say only like it's a small number, but it's gone up over 500% in the last 12 years. And it's really largely due to the mortgage meltdown. Before the mortgage meltdown of 07, 08, student loans were lent by banks and then federally insured, similar to how mortgages are today. And then after that point, the department, because banks couldn't lend anymore, the Department of Education brought everything in-house. So they became the lender. And from that point on, now one of the biggest banks in the world with, you know, $1 trillion worth of assets, they were the ones to lend it. So our IRS tax dollars are actually what's being lent in the form of student loans today. 90% of all student loans are federal. So everything I'm going to talk about today is the federal system, because if you understand the federal system, obviously you understand the lion's share of how student loan debt works. But all you got to remember, if you're taking notes or anything like that, mental notes, is that before the mortgage meltdown, student loans were lent by banks. After the mortgage meltdown, they were lent by the government, okay? And that'll come important when we come to CARES, all right? So I'm not going to go into the history, but basically tuition skyrocketed after the mortgage meltdown because subsidies ran out. And then we had a huge number of people going to school and all that kind of stuff. You know, the millennials were going to school at the same time this tuition skyrocketed. And it doesn't take a financial genius to figure out that if the cost of something increases, if you didn't know this, tuitions on average are increasing about 7 to 9% per year. Okay, and wages have been pretty much stagnant, adjusted for inflation maybe, but have been pretty much stagnant since 2000. So if you take a look at that, when the cost of something far outpaces the way we pay for it, then obviously we're gonna have to lean on a debt instrument, which is what student loan debt is. So that's how, kind of, without getting, like I said, into the minutia, that's how we got into this mess. All right. But what does this mean for real people? This is what's super important, and was alluded to by Anthony here, was the number I want to talk to you most about is this first one, because you guys deal with people's finances and their retirement. And right now, for every dollar that that someone has in student loan debt, it's a lost $10 in retirement savings. Let me say that again, not just because I stuttered, but for every $1 a student loan debt that someone has, it's a lost $10 in retirement savings. And so on average, someone's leaving school right now with $40,000 worth of student loan debt. That's the average. So that's an average of $400,000 of lost retirement savings, because the money's being siphoned from their pockets and going against them in the form of a liability instead of growing for them in the form of an asset, right? They're not being able to use compounding interest over their lifetime. So that's a huge, huge problem. And the reason I'm so passionate and love working with teams like Evolve Financial Partners and WealthWave, okay? Because we're trying to fix that. That's our whole basic, premise, is to get that problem solved. And then relationships are suffering. People are scared to get married to people that have a high amount of student loan debt. There's a 30% drop in entrepreneurship right now, directly related to student loans, because more and more young to get out there and be innovative and start that new business, new venture, because they're starting out in a hole. All right. And then home buying trends. Home buying trends have shifted from early 30s to late 30s because people want to get out from under this debt before they buy a home. Plus, this was, hot news in January, but before COVID. So the number one reason people are getting turned down for homes right now for mortgages is student loans. Of course, that was before COVID, but still, it's a big, big problem. So it's crippling the people that you're going to be talking to, right? So let's start to get in and dive into the numbers, the hands-on, the real-world scenarios, and get an idea and understanding of the technicals here, okay? So when someone leaves school, they get put into the standard student loan payment. Standard meaning it's what everybody gets. It's 120 payments monthly, divided by how much you owe plus interest, right? So it's a 10-year plan. And you're going to pay about 1% of what you owe for 10 years. All right. So the payment, for just ease of math, is roughly 1%. So if you leave school with $20,000 worth of debt, you're going to pay about $200 a month. If you leave school with $50,000, like the example shows, you're going to pay about $500 a month. And if you leave it with $100,000, or in Bud's case, when they had $230,000, that's roughly $2,300 a month that they're going to have to pay for 10 years. Okay, so this is what I call plan A, right? If you never miss a payment, or the inside the box plan is what I name it, but never miss a payment and you pay exactly what they tell you to, it'll be paid off in 10 years. All right. So this is what, your Susie Ormans, your Dave Ramseys, and those type of financial professionals, quote unquote, will tell you, is that you want to pay this thing off as fast as possible. That's the way to beat the interest. Well, that's one way. And like I said, it works if you never, and especially if your loans are smaller. This is definitely going to work for you. But let's look at what happens to most people out there. And I'll touch on what Anthony said about the garnishment problem here in a little bit. But what happens to a lot of people is this: they want to be good borrowers. They want to be good. They want to get out from under this debt so they can start their financial life and have a family and start stuff for retirement and all that. But what happens to a lot of them is life. And so let me show you what I mean. So let's say we take a hypothetical person who graduated college with $50,000 worth of debt. They're paying $500 a month, and they're halfway to their goal. They're 5 years in, and then something happens in their life. You deal with insurance. You understand how it works, right? I mean, maybe they get in a car accident, have an unexpected medical bill. Maybe they get married and have kids unexpectedly. Or maybe they can't find a job in their field of study, like 73% of all college graduates. Or maybe they get into the economy when it's turned upside down because of a crazy virus. Things happen, is my point. And a study was done in the Wall Street 17 that showed, every time, if you have a student loan, every time you run into a financial trouble, the first thing you stop paying is your student loan. That happens across the nation because people understand, either consciously or subconsciously, that you can't repossess an education, right? So what are they going to do? Put their money toward food, clothing, and shelter first, and student loans are the first thing to go on the back burner. Okay, so this is what happens. So let's imagine somebody pays for 5 years, and then they run into financial trouble, and they call the Department of Education or the student loan servicing companies, and they ask for help. And the student loan servicers are going to put them into deferment or forbearance until they get back on their feet. Well, in my opinion, and everything in this presentation is my opinion, deferment and forbearance are scams being perpetrated on the American public today, because of how student loan debt interest is calculated and collected. Student loan debt interest is calculated on simplified daily interest, and it has the ability to compound through an instrument called capitalization. That's all fancy wording and unimportant. What is important is the algorithm that runs behind student loan debt is the most aggressive there is in the financial world. If you've ever played with a compound interest calculator, and it has the ability to compound daily, yearly, monthly, or term, you will see that daily is obviously the most aggressive, and that's what we have running behind the scenes in student loans. Also, student loan debt interest is front loaded. What that means is you pay mostly interest for the first 5 years. Just like a mortgage. If you didn't know this, in a mortgage, you pay mostly interest for the first 7 years because the bankers figured out that people move or refinance every 7 years. So they wanted to get paid their profit up front and leave the principal and tax intact if you fall into those averages. Okay, so same with student loans. So this is what actually happens to people when they want to pay it off in 10 years, but this is what happens. They pay, they take a break to get back on their feet financially. They pay and they pay and they pay, and they take a break and they pay and they pay and they pay, and they keep doing this until they die or they give up. I just talked to somebody the other day. It's like, what are they going to do? They can't get blood from a stone. Well, to Anthony's point, if you don't pay your student loans, after 9 months, they fall into default, and without any kind of court order, they can garnish your paychecks, they can garnish your tax returns, and they can garnish Social Security. In 2015 alone, $150 million of Social Security checks were garnished for student loans. Okay. I don't know if you know who gets Social Security, but it's typically the elderly and the disabled. All right. And we're taking money from them. All right. Now that was 2015. I'm sure the numbers have grown because 40% of people are either in delinquency or default on their student loans. Now, obviously COVID has changed that. But before COVID, this is the fact, is it's the most toxic debt in the nation, the highest default and delinquency rate there is, because this is the trap they fall into. They never see a light at the end of the tunnel, okay? So this is the kind of the downside of the standard repayment plan and or the inside the box, thinking. And I just want to make this very clear. I am not saying not to pay your loans. I'm just saying we need to go in with our eyes wide open. If you pay exactly what they tell you to pay and you never miss a payment for 10 years, this will work for you. If not, and if you expect life to happen, or if it's happening to you, we need to look at something else, especially if the debt is gigantic, okay? So let's look at the solutions I talk about and I promote all over the country, okay? The first solution we're going to talk about is a payment plan called income-driven repayment. So it's a payment based on your income, not on the amount of debt or interest. And then the other one is student loan forgiveness. Before I go off of income-driven repayment, it's based on the borrower's income, not on the household, not on what your spouse makes, just the borrower, okay? And then there's coupled with student loan debt forgiveness is the other solution. And before I go further on that, student loan forgiveness is real. It is in the College Cost Reduction and Access Act of 2007. It was also added on to by President Obama under the HEAL Act, commonly known as Obamacare. So it's in the law, student loan debt forgiveness, and it's in the promissory note of every single direct loan borrower, meaning that in the contract that you sign with the federal government when you take on student loans, it spells out forgiveness and income-driven repayment. So how does forgiveness work? That's important because it's not just like I can just file some paperwork and the loan is gone. Otherwise, I'd be extremely rich if I could do that and nobody else could. So how it works is it's a timeline or a clock. So meaning that no matter how much you pay while the clock is running, and no matter how much is left when the clock runs out, the rest is completely forgiven. There's 6 different forgiveness plans, but the only difference between all 6 is the time that's on the clock until it kicks in. So it's like a moratorium on the debt, all right? So let's take a look at the 6 so you kind of get a good idea of what they look like. So the tick marks at the bottom of the screen that correspond with the timeline are each forgiveness plan. So if you were defrauded by your school or you're permanently disabled, you get your loans forgiven right away, no waiting, 0 time on the clock. If you're a teacher, you get partial forgiveness, only partial, after 5 years of teaching. If you work for a nonprofit or government entity, you get your loans forgiven after 10 years. It's the most common and most well-known, called public service loan forgiveness. And then President Obama, when he came in 09, he opened up forgiveness for everybody else who didn't fall into those categories after 20 or 25 years, depending on the ages of the loans, okay? So let's take a look at these in kind of a hypothetical example to flesh the idea out, all right? So when we talk to people, when you are gonna get on a call with your client and my team, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at their debt and their career and see what they qualify for as far as time. So let's hypothetically say that this person who has $50,000 worth of debt paying $500 a month on this hamster wheel, we see that they qualify for a 20-year forgiveness plan. And then the next thing we're going to do is look at their income and see if we can lower their payment. Let's say we can lower it all the way down to $50 a month. And then this is what's going to happen over that 20-year timeline, obviously, hypothetically. So we're going to start small, but maybe the payment goes up because the income's going up. You know, they're doing a little better. And then maybe it dips down because they have kids or get married. And then toward the end of this cycle, they're going to hopefully finally be able to afford their crazy high student loan monthly payment because maybe the kids are out of the house or they've worked their way up the corporate ladder or whatever. And so what we're doing is we're saving all of this money in the green squiggly line and pushing the debt off to be forgiven, okay? So let me say it like this. I am not saying that we don't want to pay the loans. I'm saying we want to pay as little as possible on the debt because this is what the lender has said. Imagine that Bank of America lent you $50,000 And then they told you when you took the loan that you only have to pay back 25. Which would you pay back, the 50 or the 25? Because if you told me you pay back the whole 50, I think you were slightly insane. It's not financially logical. Well, the Department of Education has said the exact same thing. They said, look, we know you borrowed this amount of money, but we are willing to take a portion of your income for a large chunk of your working years. And if that doesn't cover the whole thing, we'll eat the rest. And I can go into why these programs exist, but bottom line is this is their solution to the $1.7 trillion. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. It's a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, but we can use it to help people in their everyday life, especially high debt, borrowers who went and got a graduate degree. Okay, so let's look at some real world examples to flesh these ideas out. I'll do a little bit of FAQ and then we'll jump into tons of Q&A, all right? And I want you guys to leave here thinking about who in your life right now you could help and how to prospect with this, okay? So this is Katie. She's a teacher in Southern California, and she borrowed $55,000 worth of debt, and she was paying $500 with almost no principal movement for the first 5 years before she met me. And then I was like, Katie, you're a teacher at a public school. You fall into the 10-year forgiveness plan because you work for the government. It's local government, but it's still a school. And we were able to lower her payment from $550 down to $175 a month. And, she's not going to get a ton of raises because she's a teacher over the next 10 years. So it's probably going to look something like that. So we saved all that money in the green squiggly line. And we saved $375 a month right off the bat, and we'll save at least $35,000 with public service loan forgiveness over the next 10 years. Okay, let's look at, this is actually a new slide. I just put this in recently, a couple months ago, because Parent Plus loans are becoming more and more prevalent. You're going to come more across them in the future. I think that was one of Bud's examples, actually. So this is Terry, or Teresa. She took out $90,000 for her daughter to go to USC in Southern California. And she was paying $1,200 a month on that $90,000 because Parent Plus loans have a higher interest rate, higher payments. Until she met me, Larry, I don't know whether to pay my daughter's student loan or pay my mortgage. I mean, that's how dire things were getting. She was like, I could sell my house and live in my RV. And I was like, nothing against RV life, hashtag, van life, but let's take a look at what we could do before we get that drastic, all right? So we set her up in the 20-year forgiveness plan, and based on her income, we were able to lower her payment down to $150 a month. And we don't know what's going to happen over her income. We don't have a crystal ball over the next 20 years. She's in marketing, so it might go up gradually. I don't know. We saved her a little over $1,000 a month, and we saved her $50,000 at least with forgiveness. Now, the reason I added this slide and the reason I named my book Student Loan Debt Secrets is the last slide, public service loan forgiveness and Parent Plus loans are one of the most highly guarded secrets in the student loan industry, okay? No one but me, when it comes to Parent Plus loans, is out there talking about the fact that you can get these payments in the lowest payment plan and the shortest forgiveness plans, all right? It's littered with minefields, when mines or whatever, landmines, when it comes to Parent Plus loans. So very hard to find the actual truth around them, okay? And then lastly, this is John. He's a chiropractor out of Texas, and he borrowed $200,000 to go to chiropractic school. I don't know if you knew this. We'll get into it a little bit later about who can help be affected by this, but chiropractors have to take on a ridiculous amount of debt. So do naturopathic physicians, acupuncturists, even veterinarians, because they got to go to a medical school and then they got to specialize in whatever field they're going into. So typically chiropractors have a giant amount of debt, dentists too, things like that. So he borrowed $200,000, and he had heard about these programs. I didn't invent income-driven repayment and forgiveness. I just promote them. And I maximize their efficiency. So he had heard about them, and he was able to take his $2,000 a month payment down to $1,000 a month. And he'd been paying on that and not seeing almost anything happen for quite a long time. And so I said to him, he had the similar story as Terry. He said, I don't know whether to keep my practice open, Larry, or pay the student loan. It's just killing me. And I was like, well, John, you're a small business owner, right? He's like, yeah, I'm the owner. I'm like, great. We can use the expenses through your business to offset your income that we show to the Department of Education, just like you would use your expenses to the IRS. And so what that means is, in layman's terms, is on paper he made a lot of money, but in actuality he didn't pay himself very much. So we're able to take that, what he was actually paying himself, and we lowered his, we set him up with a 25-year forgiveness plan because he had super old loans, and we're able to lower his payment down to $10 a month, okay, from $1,000. This happens a lot with small business owners. You know, they don't know what is available to them, and that's the same in the tax world as well. But anyway, as long as I can't promise that his payment will stay $10 for 25 years, but as long as he's a small business owner, we'll always be able to use the expenses and always be able to get him as low as humanly possible a price. So we saved him about $1,000 a month right off the bat, and we'll save him the whole $200,000 if I have anything to do with it, and if he stays a small business owner. Okay.